We did have a few more people who said that they were going to dial in, but they're not here yet, so we'll go ahead. My name's Nancy Bolton. I'm chair of the Jefferson Humanist Program Committee, and I'm going to play the role of announcer today. That's usually done by Matthew, but Matthew is our tech guy today, so we are kind of switching roles a little bit. Announcements for what we're doing. Some reminders once we get started, once Chris sets up. I believe Matthew's going to mute all of us, and we ask you not to unmute. If you have questions, we ask that you put them in the chat. Does everybody know where the chat is? It's at the bottom of the page. It's like that little empty paragraph with a little curly Q on the bottom. So if you have a question, or if you just want to comment on what you're hearing, be sure and put it in the chat, and we will read at the end of the presentation. We will read the questions that are in the chat for Chris to answer. We also ask that you turn off your video camera, just because that way people can focus better on the speaker. And also, if you have to sneeze or get a phone call or whatever, we're not seeing what you're doing. So we ask that you turn off your video. And if also helps if you pick speaker view. If you put your little arrow up to the very top of the screen, you will see speaker view. And when you do that, you will see whomever is speaking. If you do it now, you'll see me. When Chris, see him. Okay, we are looking for, Jefferson Humanists is looking for an administrative intern. We're looking for someone to work this fall, helping with various administrative tasks and helping build our membership. A candidate could be a junior or a senior in college or a graduate student, just someone who could help. We're open to those. We need them to have strong writing, verbal communication, and computer technology skills. Organized, self-motivated, reliable. It'd be nice if they're aware of humanism and had progressive values. And we're interested in nonprofit management. It would be great for that person. You can email, and I will put this in the chat after I finished announcing, careers@jeffersonhumanists.org. Jefferson Humanists always has an S on the end. So it'd be careers@jeffersonhumanists.org for a full copy of the announcement. And it's going to be on our website fairly soon. The deadline to apply is just next Saturday. So think about it. And if you know someone who would be interested, have them do it. So deadline is October 3rd. Nominations committee is looking for members for the board of directors. They attend, they're asked to attend 6 per year. And if they'd like, they can also appear at our coordinating council meetings. If you're interested in either self-nominating, which is perfectly acceptable, or suggesting candidates, you can email your nominations to our chair, Tracy Bickle, or just do it at nominations@jeffersonhumanists.org. So that's nominations@jeffersonhumanists.org. Humanist Helping Humanity is our social responsibility group, and we are working with our, we have a program called Keep Jeffco Warm Drive, sewing and knitting warm accessories for those in our community experiencing hardships. We're looking at hats, balaclavas, which are kind of neck warmers, I think, or etc. Our member, Roberta Larson, is spearheading this drive, and they're going to meet by Zoom on October 6th at 7 p.m. And if you're interested in helping with this drive, you can write HHH, that's a triple H, at jeffersonhumanists.org, and they'll send you the Zoom link. And here's some other things in the order they're going to happen. This Tuesday, we're having Discuss a Doc, which is Discuss a Documentary that's free for you to view. And this one's going to be called Going Clear, Scientology and the Prison of Belief. This is on our Meetup page, and it's this Tuesday at 7 p.m. Then on Thursday, we have a Secular Community Trivia Night. And this is first and third Thursday of each month, and you guys play trivia. It's a lot of fun. The monthly hike is the next thing, and that's on Saturday the 3rd at the main reservoir in Lakewood, and that's at 10 a.m. in the morning. Then on the first Monday of each month is the JH Salon, where they discuss some sort of interesting question. And the question this month is, should voting be mandatory? And that's on Monday, October 5th at 7 p.m. And then the Frog book discussion is going to be on So You Want to Talk About Race. Oh boy, am I going to mess up this word. Iljeoma Oluo, something like that. And that's from 2 to 4 p.m. on Saturday, October 10th. And that's the second Saturday of the month. And then the final announcement for now is that the next Humanist Perspectives, which is on Saturday, October 17th, where we talk about different humanist issues, is going to be a mini film festival of short films by Neil deGrasse Tyson, Richard Dawkins, Carl Sagan, George Kate Carlin, and another humanist. So that's a full range of Jefferson Humanist activities. For those of you who may not be familiar with us, we do a lot of stuff, and you always have an opportunity to participate in one way or another. Now, if you go to our Meetup site, if you just Google Jefferson Humanist at Meetup, you'll get to see all the things we are doing, and you have the opportunity to register for them. And as soon as you register, they'll send you the link. So I think we are done. I will announce information about the October chapter meeting, the fourth Sunday of October, when Chris is done. So Bob Hoffman, who is a member, co-chair of the program committee, is going to introduce our speaker. Bob, take it away.
Am I on?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, I can't see anything, but I do see Chris.
Okay.
Chris Moore has published a lot of material on music, including a book on piano music, 2 successful musicals, an album called August Light, and the music drama From the Realm of the Shadows, available on Noxus Records. He's been a classical music radio announcer since 1978, currently hosts a Classic Monday and Opera Box on KGNU in Boulder. And he hosts the Summer Classic Music Show on Aspen Public Radio every summer, including this summer. He did it, the official voice of the Aspen Music Festival and School. He's going to talk to us today about a research project that he's been working on for, well, over 10 years, I guess, creating a musical Mandela. I'm going to let him stop. I'm going to stop and let him tell you all about that. We are really pleased to have Chris Moore be our presenter today. So let's have a little round of applause for Chris Moore. And Chris, take it away for us.
Thank you. And thank you so much. You know, this is my first time being able to give a lecture on the Grand Unified Theory of Music. And my book just came out as an ebook. I'm going to bring myself back so hopefully people can see me and not just my mandala there. I'm going to try to make this as non-technical as possible. I know some of you are musicians, some of you have perhaps no musical experience. There will be a few things that I'll say that maybe you non-musicians might not be able to understand, but please be patient. But within a minute or two, I'll get back to something that doesn't require any musical knowledge. But in the promotional material that I wrote up for this, I was asking the question about why music is the universal language, why it is that if you were to read a Japanese poem, no matter how beautiful, it would be completely meaningless to you because you don't know the Japanese language. But you could hear a Japanese song or a Japanese flute piece or something and be deeply moved by it without having any idea of anything about Japanese musical traditions. So I wanted to know, well, what is it about music that is so universal? And I wanted to kind of get all the way down to the core of it. There are theory systems that have been developed all through history by advanced musical cultures, and there are musical traditions that are oftentimes passed not through theorists, but just through musical practice all over the world. Our Western European theory system that we use for classical music and rock music and everything else is, interestingly, of all the different major traditions, the only one that developed to be completely out of tune with the natural world. we can't really hear ancient music the way it was originally heard by the ancients, because they played their music in tune, and our pianos and guitars and everything else are out of tune. The grand unified theory of music rectifies that problem and brings us back in tune. If you know a little bit about music and you're interested in what ancient or ethnic music should really sound like, then employing the grand unified theory of music offers you some of these things. For one thing, being able to play several hundred ancient scales from all over the world in their original pure tunings, changing keys at will in these scales, something that the ancients could never do, mixing and matching all the ancient scales. So you go from China to Arabic to Byzantine to Indian to Roman, and you can just bounce back and forth even within the same piece, staying perfectly in tune with each of these ancient scales. And that's something I do all the time in my own compositions, by the way. This gives you the ability to deeply understand Western classical music and our traditions here, and the why behind every musical textbook rule. So those of you that had to study music theory, you may know there's this, here's this rule, here's this rule, and well, why? Well, yeah. And this helps you understand that a lot better too. The ability to revive ancient musical and cultural traditions without doing violence to the power of the natural harmonies that their music originally evoked. And then looking to the future, the ability to create chords built off of higher harmonics than were used in ancient music, to create musical affects and effects that have just flat out never been heard before. So these were the things that got me really interested and really charged up about trying to find a grand unified theory for music. Cultures all over the world have gone off in different directions with their musical traditions, but there is a universal yearning in science and religion and psychology and all kinds of things to find core commonality. This is very common with any scientific theory, taking a bunch of data. What is it that holds all that data together? What's the principle that unifies that data and explains it all? I wanted to find out if there's such a thing like that that's true in music. Now, until 1400, even though every advanced culture in the world was going off in their own different directions and didn't have much interaction with each other, every advanced society's music, including our own, was based on these natural overtones that I'll be talking about in a few minutes. But here in Europe and the United States eventually, to allow for more complexity in music, like changing keys, Western Europeans compromised tunings away from those natural overtones. And so now the way we tune the piano is actually detuned from these natural overtones. I'll be explaining these natural overtones, like I said, in just a little bit. But I want to say, kind of from a political point of view, you might say, or historical point of view, in the name of progress, we just took the 12-note keyboard, and any of you that know a guitar or a piano or anything, you know that there's 12 notes. I mean, you go from C to C, there's 12 notes there. And they just decided to just equally space it up, just chop it into 12 equal units, and that was it. And that does violence to our ears. It does violence to the natural harmonics. We get what I would call a non-organic tuning that brings dissonance and conflict into every piece of music we play. So a beautiful classical piece on a good day sounds out of tune to me. It sounds exhausting after a while. And then as the Western European nations conquered most of Africa and Asia and the Americas, they also pushed their tuning system onto the music cultures they assimilated. I call it harmonic musical imperialism. Western values are about progress, and our musical structure is about desire and fulfillment in music. Eastern music, by contrast, is about apparent movement around a fundamental tone, the Om in India, for example, which is played on a dronal instrument. So what we need really is an all-embracing musical template. And let me jump over to my share screen again, just to go right back to what I had before. Come on up, you can do it. There we go. So this is that all-embracing musical template, which can be employed to express the Western ideals of progress and desire and fulfillment, and also expressing the purity of the ancient tunings, which are the musical values of India and most other cultures around the world. In one, where's that happening? Oh, there we go. Okay. So the first time that my musical journey started to try to go into this universal direction was when we can start when I was 10 and I started composing, and the whole world seemed out of tune to me. And I'd go into recording studios and I'd tell all the musicians they were playing out of tune. They were playing perfectly in tune with the out of tune tuning that we have in the West. But I started composing a mass when I was 12 years old. And I would say, like, from G to A flat, I'd say, let's go 2/3 of the way up from G to A flat and sing that note for everybody. And I tried to tell my choir director to do that. And he said, that note doesn't exist. Well, I sang the pitch and he still denied that it existed. To him, there were 12 equally spaced notes on a piano or a guitar, whatever, and no more. And that's what you sang too. It's as if he were a painting teacher and all he told his students was that they could paint in only 12 colors. Now, in the meantime, in my inner ear, I kept hearing music that was more harmonious than anything known in traditional music in any genre. I'd always been attracted to grand unified theories. I know Stephen Hawking, devoting his life to developing such a theory for the physical forces of the cosmos, and other thinkers and writers of our time have attempted the same thing in other realms like psychology or philosophy or religion or whatever. And am I visible at this point? All I see up is Bob Hoffman, but hopefully I'm still visible. Since 1945, humanity seems to have been searching for an ever greater urgency for some kind of deeper union after the horrific divisiveness of the two world wars. And I too have always felt a great certainty that the cosmos is imbued with a profound underlying unity that can be discovered both through direct experience and through scientific study. So we look at a piano today or a guitar, we see that instrument fixed in its tuning to 12 equal divisions of the octave. This standardization was created as a product of the Industrial Revolution. Everything was being brought into conformity with everything else. Units of measure, assembly lines, uniform codes, the uniform metric decimal system perfected and employed throughout Europe around 1790, laws, Webster's Dictionary of 1828 and its standardization of the English language. And in the case of musical tuning, we began tuning not to the actual natural overtones, but to the measuring system that we ourselves artificially created. So as I was saying, my first attempt, let me bring my screen back up here again. My first attempt to really get into unifying all of music was in my music drama From the Realm of the Shadow that's out on Naxos Records. The result was more of an eclectic sampling and a mixing of many musical styles. I didn't dig deeply enough to find the meta theory that united all the musical traditions. It was obvious that somehow the ancient scales using the pure natural harmonics were going to be the answer to this quest. So I started collecting these scales based on the mathematic and harmonic ratios of the ancient theorists from all over the world. I literally ended up with hundreds of them, as you'll see. Now, let me go here. Here we go. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about that harmonic series, which informs all of ancient music. If you pluck a string or blow into a clarinet, you'll hear a note. And that note that you hear is the fundamental tone. And if all you could hear was the fundamental pitch and none of the overtones, you would hear a pure sine wave, and that sounds like this right here. That's a pretty boring sound, actually. And of course, that's not what we hear naturally at all. What we hear are different kinds of sounds that have different sound qualities. They're called timbres. So, for example, every single one of us as a person who sings has a different timbre, a different sound quality. The clarinet sounds different from the oboe. The piano sounds different from an electric guitar. And so we're not hearing only the fundamental pitch. If you pluck a string, look down in the bottom right there on my little design, you see that the full length of that string is going to vibrate for that fundamental tone. Half of the length of the string vibrates twice as fast and creates the second overtone. And then a third of the length of the string vibrates 3 times as fast, creating the third harmonic. And then the fourth harmonic and the fifth harmonic vibrating 5 times as fast, and the sixth and the seventh harmonic. And this goes on until some point at which the string can't really divide anymore effectively in the physical universe. So instead of just a simple sine wave like we saw before, you can look at the waveform in the bottom left there, and you can see that now what we have is a very, very complex waveform with all these partials, all these parts of the string that are also vibrating as well as the fundamental pitch. And if you look at those of you that can read music at all, if you just look at the bottom note there, that very low C, and go up from there, the harmonic series goes up from the bottom. So you hear the fundamental pitch and then these other notes too that sound like this right here. And this is a really cheesy, not the best sound at all. It's a cheesy synthesizer sound. And yet even here, it sounds beautiful. And in fact, I consider the harmonic series and these natural overtones to be the source of all beauty in music. Now, and by the way, those harmonics, those natural harmonics that I just played, are the basis of all of the ancient scales from all through history, even not only the advanced cultures like ancient China or the Roman Catholic Church or ancient India, which had the more advanced cultures, but also the more basic cultures where people just instinctively sang their sweet spots and found that those were also the natural harmonics. So before we go too much further, I just want to play the most ancient scale that we know. I'm going to play it at the beginning now, and I'll play a piece of music at the end that I wrote that employs this ancient scale. It's called the Lin Lung scale from China. It is 4,700 years old. It's just 5 perfect fifths piled up on top of each other. And so let me just try to play this. There we go. Real simple tune. And Qing Fang, he's only 4,000 years old, also from ancient China. And he actually, plucking strings and doing all kinds of mathematical calculations, discovered 53 equal notes to the octave. That tuning system that I'm using today, it was him that discovered that over 4,000 years ago. And if you just keep going up by pure fifths, that kind of comes around in a circle and almost perfectly lands back together again. So I decided, okay, somehow, and people have known about this for centuries, for millennia. Mercator, Isaac Newton dabbled with this tuning system and wrote an unpublished work about 53 equal. And I felt that if I could somehow map out all these different scales from all over the world that I had, somehow they would fit into a 53 note to the octave keyboard. So I hired a custom keyboard builder, a guy named Harvey Starr from San Diego, to design a 53 note to the octave keyboard. And that's got 5 octaves on it. It's going to be pretty hard for you to see, but if you're familiar with the piano, you know that there's all the sharps and flats are the black notes, and you can see them there. So you'll see 3 and 3 white notes and 2 black notes on top of them, and then 4 black notes and 4 white notes and 3 black notes on top of that. And that kind of creates your C major scale on a regular piano keyboard. This is a honeycomb shape, and it actually has 6 keyboards on it all together, just kind of piled together. And that, in a sense, what that creates is the possibility of up to 72 notes to the octave. So I use 53 of them when I do my music. So let me stop sharing here and come back to just myself. Here I am. So I couldn't figure out how to put all this together, though. I had the keyboard, I had all these ratios, and I had all these pitches and everything for all these different ancient scales. And for me personally, I knew I was really close, but I couldn't quite get there. I knew that the whole world was out of tune to me, and that now I knew that I was right because these ancient scales were proving my basic point there. And it took me 5 years. And one early morning, finally in February of 2004, I was in complete despair. My floor, actually right down below me, right down here, was strewn with all these papers covered with ratios and numbers and scales and mathematical stuff. And I was figuring out all these logarithmic things. And I wasn't a mathematician, so this was not easy for me. I just took a big exhale. And all of a sudden, as I looked at the floor, it was as if hundreds of dead gray numbers were lying around everywhere. And suddenly they all lit up, each number like a numinous, blazing, living force, like little stars. And they shot up in the air, and they created 9 concentric circles, all exquisitely interconnected. And each number was now its own energy source, no longer represented by the symbols that we use, like 1, 2, or 3. They were all profoundly interconnected. The vision lasted only a couple minutes, but suddenly I completely understood all the mathematical connections among all 300 plus ancient scales that I had pulled out. I was able to draw a large musical mandala, which is exactly what you've seen a little bit of. And let me bring this back up again to share screen. Come on up, you can do it. Here we go. So that brings us back to that musical mandala that I was talking about. And all the written numbers and letters and the line intersections, which illuminated the illuminated pitches and ratios that I saw in the vision, were now something that I could actually write out in such a way that I could give mathematical, I could enumerate each one of these so I knew exactly where I was. And then I could play all the scales from ancient Japan, China, India, Arabia, Turkey, Greece, Rome, Byzantium, Egypt, Tunisia, all over the planet. All this music that could be played in a single piece of music on a single instrument, all their underlying harmonic similarities, bringing them into a perfect union. And honestly, I felt like Galileo may have felt with the world's first telescope. Just imagine, wherever he pointed his instrument, he would discover literally thousands of stars that no one had ever seen before. And that's how I feel about 53 equal music. Everywhere I look, I see new musical potentials. So let me come back to just me here. So as I began to play some of these lost ancient scales and their pure original tunings, I sometimes wept for joy. It's like sleeping giants being roused from their slumbers and allowed to sing once again. The advanced ancient civilizations all had a class of people who had the time to study mathematics and the cosmos, but every ancient musical system was fixed in a single, what we call today a key signature. So if there was an ancient mode that started in F, then by God, it ended in F. And there was pretty much no such thing as key change. And there's a static quality to much of ancient music, which reflects, first of all, a spiritual connection to some core presence around which the entire cosmos dances, but it also reflects the static nature of a lot of these societies. I mean, China was about survival and preservation and thousands of years going by with one kingdom after another. So for Westerners, for those of you who know music, modulation or changing keys, let's say from F major to C major or something like that, that's about transformation and exploration. The interest that composers have in that fits with our cultural values of these things, the cultural imperative of Western civilization for expansion and change and intellectual complexity, improvement, moving forward. In service of these goals, by the early 1800s, pianos are being tuned to 12 logarithmically equal pitches, smoothing out any differences among the scales, doing audible violence to the uneven natural musical intervals which appear in the ancient scales. So gradually, the ancient tunings began to die out as musicians from around most of the world traded being in tune for being up to date. It was that musical imperialism I was talking about. Now, there remain pockets of musical traditions that preserve the ancient tunings around the world, but being in tune is clearly a minority pursuit today. Employing 53 equal tuning means my compositions can unify the harmoniousness of ancient scales and the transformational power of Western European musical tradition. I can blend these scales together, finding a common thread of harmonic purity so they can discover in one another, singing together an earthly harmony unknown to us until now. The aha moment in science is often a revelation of a simple unifying principle that unites data collected from observing a lot of phenomena. My 53 equal journey is a process of solving that riddle of the cosmos as it manifests in music. I don't know how others feel when they discover some unifying principle that brings disparate things in the universe together, but what I felt was love. So let's talk a little bit more about that musical mandala. Let me bring it back up again. Come on, you can do it. There we go. One friend called this the circle of fifths on steroids. What we're talking about here is the unique musical overtones that are used by all the ancients, the third harmonic and the fifth harmonic, the lowest harmonics, you might say. And music theorists use them all around the world. And then what I do is I just map them all out on a single chart. So moving horizontally here, I don't know if you can see the note C, which is kind of up near the top and kind of in the center of all those different circles. But from that C, if you just go up a fifth, C, D, E, F, G, C, D, E, F, G, and you hear that, you go up a fifth, and then you go up another fifth to the D, etc. And so the horizontal line basically gives you the perfect fifths. So let's take a listen. Here's what the perfect fifths sound like if you just pile them on top of each other. That actually sounds kind of cool. And then the vertical pole, which is if you start at C and you go up to an E, and then you go up to a G sharp, you go down to an A flat or down to an F flat. This is the next harmonic up. It's called the fifth harmonic. And if you pile those on top of each other, it sounds kind of like this. That's the major third on a piano. And that's the natural third. And then here they are kind of piling up natural thirds. So if you bring all that together, the fifths going on the horizontal plane, the thirds on the vertical plane, that's the nature of the essence of this mandala tonal relationships for hundreds of ancient scales in their original tunings. And I'll give you a little bit of let's focus in a little bit more. You can see the note C now kind of near the center, a little bit towards the bottom there. And almost every scale ever created by every advanced culture in music history, with very few exceptions, fits perfectly onto this mandala somewhere. So just as an example, if you start at that note C and you, let's find the major scale. So if you go from that note C down to the F just to the left, and then up to the G and the D. And then if you go up from the C up to the E, that's just straight above it. And then from that E go to the A to its left and the B to its right. Those 7 notes are the definition of a major scale. So that's to give you an easier way to see that. This is the ancient Mixolydian Greek scale. And it's just a little piece of that giant mandala where the F, C, G, and D are on one horizontal plane, and above those are A and E, and below it on another horizontal plane is the B flat. Now, you don't have to know a lot about music to see that it's actually possible then that every ancient scale can have a pattern. This is the pattern for Mixolydian. There'd be a different pattern, but all the patterns fit in very nicely into this. I use this mandala constantly in my composing. And almost every ancient scale in the world can be mapped out here by doing this. It's so incredible. So let's also talk about other musical realms that are possible in 53 equal music. I've talked a little bit about ancient music so far, and we're going to come back and talk about this a little bit more. The 300 scales I have and thousands of others that I haven't even written about in my book. And then the second possibility that you can see here is common practice music, our Western European classical tradition from around 1500 to 1900. It's employed in pop and jazz music, but it's traditional classical music. And that music theory system is available to us in 53 equal 2. You can make some translations. And then contemporary music of the 20th century, which, like Schoenberg with no tonal center, it's actually possible to do something with that too. And then finally, music of the future, the 7th harmonic, which we haven't really talked about yet. And we'll get to that a little bit later. So all of those possibilities exist in 53 equal. So let's say a few more words about the first of these musical realms that we've been focusing on so far, that of ancient music. The interesting thing about China, and many other cultures are somewhat like this as well, all of ancient Chinese music relates to the unchanging primal vibration, a sound vibration that became not only the center, the beginning of every scale, but also the unit of measure for height and weight and volume and speed and everything. I have several other Far Eastern scales from Japan and the Pacific Islands and Korea, et cetera, et cetera. Here are a couple koto scales that come from ancient Japan. So you have this whole Eastern Asian space that music is in. And then we come to ancient Greece, which is the next major place where a musical theory flowering took place with Pythagoras, of course. And Pythagoras, who could hear the music of the spheres, also in a way he worked very hard to standardize music theory and music traditions, because ancient Greece, like a lot of other places before him, there were a whole bunch of other scales and modes and musicians kind of going in a lot of different directions. And these are the 7 ancient Greek modes in their original tunings. I'll play these. That's Lydian. That was Ionian. Mixolydian. That was Dorian. So again, these were the ones, and these were the basis then for a very similar set of church modes in the ancient Catholic Church. The Byzantine Church went in very, very different directions. I won't get into that right now. So that's a whole world that I talk about very extensively in my book. And then we have the ancient musicians of the Arabian Peninsula and Turkey, many highly sophisticated music theorists. And by the way, Turkey extensively, even today, uses a 53 note to the octave template for their scales. Middle Eastern musicians never standardized their performance practices the way the ancient Greeks and Catholics and Chinese did. So if you're obsessed with standardizing and doing music the one right way, the intuitive sensibilities of Arabic musicians will drive you insane. But if you're like the Arab mystics, you will drink deeply from the sound of love singing a song to its own ears. Well, there are literally hundreds of maqams, and I played just a few examples in my book. Now we go to India. This is pretty fascinating, actually. It says in the Upanishads, the syllable Om, which is the imperishable Brahman, is the universe. Whatsoever has existed, whatsoever exists, whatsoever shall exist hereafter is Om. This is another variation, also going back thousands of years, of the Chinese primal vibration. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the tonoscope. Hans Jenny invented it. It's basically fine sand poured on a tight membrane like a drum head, and as sounds pass through it, the random grains of sand organize into patterns like you see here. So chant the Om like the rishis do, and the tonoscope will show you a pattern identical to that of the Om's ancient mandala. And then hundreds of the richest, most complex harmonic relationships arise from that central, constantly played Om sound. So on the left is the print, the mandala that goes back thousands of years. And then you can see on the tonoscope what chanting the Om looks like, and it's the same. How did they know that back then, before that machine was invented? I don't know whatsoever. But it's a very, very different world, I'll tell you. This is one of hundreds of Indian scales, the Bhairav scale. The Om remains the center of that universe. So if I change keys in Indian music, which I actually do, it's considered by the Indian traditionalists to be destroying and recreating the entire universe. The tambura always plays the Om, which is the tonic tone, the bass tone. And here's just an example of the Bhairav scale. And I have scales from many African countries, the bagpipes, the Eastern Europeans, the Celts, Burma, Portugal, Egypt, Tibet, Java, etc., etc., etc. So yes, I can combine all these scales together. And just as an example, I wrote a piece where I set some music by a poem by St. Augustine, who lived in the ancient port city of Hippo in North Africa. He heard music of the ancient Catholics, Byzantine music, songs of the North African Berber tribes, ancient Greek musical influences, Central African rhythms, and more. I found examples of all these scales and rhythms and wove them into a song setting of his famous 4th century poem, Late Have I Loved You. The second big area that 53 music is about, and I'm not going to say very much about this now because I know time is limited here, is the whole Western classical tradition, which includes pop and jazz and rock, etc. I have a long session about what it takes to take Western 12 equal music and translate it into 53 equal. It kind of brings it back to its roots. Theory books, as I said before, are a list of rules, and the harmonic principles of those rules are uncovered in 53 equal tuning, which gives you much closer to just intonation. The third big category, which again I won't talk about too much, is contemporary music, like Schoenberg with his atonal music. This is where there's no musical center. There's just tone clusters. It's music that tends to be very dissonant and harsh. Interestingly, when you try to create harsh sounding music in 53 equal, you can avoid musical centers, but it doesn't sound as dissonant as it does in 12 equal because there's not very much dissonance built into 53 equal. beyond that. The fourth, and for me, the most exciting category really is as exciting as the ancient music is, and that is what I call the new consonants, and it employs the seventh harmonic. So this is just a little bit of the big mandala, not curved this time, but you can see that these are the perfect fifths are going along the horizontal, and the thirds are going up and down on this. And to create this a seventh harmonic template, you'd have to actually go into a third dimension. So you'd create like a big cube of things. Now, 99+% of all music throughout history, this two-dimensional design works fine. Most ancients actually avoid the seventh harmonic, and some believed it was the gateway from the realm of the living to the realm of the dead, and they wanted to avoid that as much as possible. So we have, let's see, I'm sorry. Let me just play a little bit of what the seventh harmonic actually sounds like, the natural seventh harmonic, which is way in the cracks of a piano. You can't really imitate it on a piano at all. Come back, here we are. So that's what the sound is. It's kind of interesting because just yesterday, Karen and I were hiking over Hoosier Pass near Breckenridge. We heard someone playing an alp horn, and I distinctly heard that alp horn playing that natural seventh harmonic that was just played here for you. French horns and trumpets have that. They have valves and things to detune themselves back to 12 equal pitchings, but the natural harmonics appear in all these brass instruments all the time. And blues and jazz singers have employed the natural seventh harmonic as well for decades. The natural harmonic from C to B flat is a lot flatter than the B flat that you hear on the piano. And chord progressions employing the seventh harmonic as a pivot can follow all the rules of traditional voicing. This is for those of you that are musicians. And they present some amazing sonic possibilities. When you get into real septimal harmony, you can hear that 39% of a half step microtonal shift all over the place. And I could easily spend the rest of my life exploring the possibilities of seventh harmonic chord progressions. I have created a couple hundred of them myself already. Here's just a couple of them just to give you a little bit of an idea. And if this sounds very natural and just kind of flowing, that's the whole idea. This is pure consonant music, very, very beautiful, and nevertheless. So Beethoven once said, music is the one incorporeal entrance into the higher realm of knowledge, which comprehends mankind, but which mankind cannot comprehend. And music and mysticism have gone hand in hand for countless thousands of years. For myself, if I can find innocence and purity in music, which is asking a lot, that's a really good start. But I have also discovered that there are many other music theory systems that tie into mystical systems, the chakras, for example, and where, as it turns out, the third and the fifth and the seventh and ninth harmonics, and et cetera, can be connected in one way or another in surprisingly interesting ways, where the chakras and those overtones, the natural overtones, have a connection. Astrology has many, many connections because of the music of the spheres. The I Ching has many connections, and my book talks about all those things. Synesthesia, or the merging of sound and color, which some of you who have experienced LSD trips may have had that happen, and some of you may have that ability anyway without any chemical aids. But how sound and color relate to one another and how the natural harmonics fit into all of that, that's a whole other thing. Numerology has been very, very interesting. And one of my numerological friends had a really hard time because the number 53 has very little significance to numerologists, which I consider nice. It's untouched territory. And unfortunately, if you feel that these pure natural harmonics that you get from either pure just intonation or from 53 equal music is good, it's better, it's great, it's possible that you may come to believe that the 12 equal system that we've lived with all our lives is evil in some way. And there are many conspiracy theories, it's not hard to find them on the internet, that say that, for example, A440, which is how we tune our instruments to 440 beats per second for the note A, and that was actually believed by some conspiracy theorists to have been created by the Nazis, by Goebbels, to control our minds, and that there's a better vibration that creates a better sound and a better natural resonance with our bodies. And that there are people who believe that there are conspiracy theories around leaving the natural harmonics that I've been talking about and going to the 12 equal. I don't really want to go there, and I don't want to go too far into too many of the mystical connections, because you can spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the mystical connections are rather than just writing music. So for me, it's, I think, much more important not to do that. So my grand unified theory of music is what I call a strand of the grand unified theory of unity and love. There's a large body of thought out there that every time two things are brought together that are disparate, that love shows itself. Raman, an Indian musician I love, who said, if you understand the essence of religion, it's about love. Though it's a cliche, it's the truth. It's what I'm trying to do with my music. So this gives us, at the very least, an important historical perspective to understand all the mystical traditions that go around. And I will say that whether you're a humanist or whether you are a very deeply religious or mystical person or whatever, I think we all share a great sense of awe that all of this kind of fits together so well. This urge to unite and to find the things that are in common with apparently disparate things that are happening in the world, that's an impulse that shines through the hearts of many of us. To me, 53 equal is a mother lode, and you enter that mine and you find creative possibilities of this ancient and almost never used tuning template. I can't even imagine what musicians can unearth. I have personally dug up hundreds of ancient and new scales. Each one of these old scales and modes has been used as a vessel into which countless composers have poured their hearts thousands of times. Elaborate traditions have been built around these scales. New musical constellations are being discovered as well. People continue to create scales and modes never before dreamed of. Point your telescope into this universe of new possibilities where each scale is a radiant star inviting you to explore all the ways its rays can inspire you. Think of all the incredible music that's been created by the binary star system of major and minor for the last 500 years. And now open the aperture to the entire night sky and begin to reawaken that universe of musical possibilities that, as St. Augustine once called, so ancient and so new. So I'd like to end with a piece I composed using the very ancient Chinese Ling Lun scale I played earlier, which I set to a poem by the Indian mystic Kabir back when I got married 37 years ago. It's not in 53 equal, but the tuning is actually very close to the pure ancient tunings that Ling Lun heard some 4,000 years ago. And I believe that my grand unified theory of music is that strand of love that goes through all things. And this is one strand of it. So let's take a listen. Come back up, go down here. These are the lyrics now to this poem. And I would have to say the last line of this poem is what motivated so much of what I've been doing for so many years with 53 equal music. This starts out very, very quietly. want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for letting me share this for the first time. This is, I guess, version 1.0 of my lecture. The book itself is an ebook, and it has all the hundreds of different musical scales on it. It's called The Grand Unified Theory of Music. I don't know who is going to actually be reading me questions, but I'm available for any questions anyone may have.
Okay, I have fielded the questions, Chris, and the first one is, well, can we buy your music someplace?
Well, from the Realm of the Shadow, the opera, and you just heard a little excerpt from that, that's available on Naxos Records. So yes, that's available, and that's about 2 hours long. And it's with a full symphony orchestra, chorus, solo singers, and about 30 different ethnic and ancient instruments are thrown into the mix too. So like I said, it's my first attempt. I'm still working on composing, and I've not been able to get real performances out of the 53 equal music.
Nancy and I were in Nepal last year, and we went to a concert where people were playing and singing music very much like you just demonstrated for us. And I assume that they're using one of the scales that one of the many that you talked about. Are you familiar with that one in Nepal?
Well, of course, not the particular one, but what I did was called the pentatonic scale, like C, D, E, G, A, for example, or the black notes on the piano. And so they probably, I know when I was in Nepal that I was hearing a lot of pentatonic pieces. The nice thing about a lot of pentatonic music, like what I just played, nothing that you can play is dissonant. Everything fits together. It's easy. And it creates a certain beauty and a certain flow to it that is profoundly different from Western music, as I'm sure you noticed.
Okay, could you talk about well-tempered tuning and how that fits into your to the mandala that you've created?
Right. Well, if we start with pure just intonation, which is what my mandala is bringing us back to, that goes back to the ancient times of about 1400. The well-tempered clavier by Bach is the most famous example. And actually, well-tempered is not quite exactly the same as 12 equal, but very close. The well-tempered tunings that Bach and others were using in the early 1700s was, instead of being a perfect circle with exactly notes that are exactly equidistant from each other, there'd be ever so slight variations on them so that you'd come a little bit closer to those natural harmonics, but still they tended to be pretty far out of tune. And Bach really loved the well-tempered clavier, the well-tempered system, because then he could play in all 12 keys. And Bach loved complexity. And so he actually pushed for that option of greater complexity while sacrificing harmonic purity.
Okay, here's one. Would it be possible for a conventional Western music group that is playing a 12-tone scale to be able to play your music?
Yes. In fact, I have cultivated a friendship with Johnny Reinhardt of the American Festival of Microtonal Music based in New York, and they can play any alternative tuning system, where you call it microtonal, or in my case, 53 equal, just intonation. Doesn't matter what tuning system you throw at them. And my mandala actually has Johnny Reinhardt's, his notation system is part of it, so that there's different ways that you can, like every note that I have, it might say C sub 1, and then it might say C minus 23 or something, so that when it comes time for Johnny to play it, when I finally get the music written and completed, then I'm going to be hiring him to put together an ensemble. He has access to an entire orchestra's worth of musicians who can play in any tuning imaginable. Yes, but it's really hard. I mean, these are the 800-pound gorillas of the music world that can do this.
So we saw some of your manuscript work. I mean, some of the demonstrations you showed, 5 lines and 4 spaces. Is that what you would use to describe whatever music you write?
Yes, that's actually how I write my music. And the only difference, and you may or may not have seen this, but I might have like the note C, but then it might have a sub 1 or a superscript 1. And so there are sub 2 or superscript 2. So there are actually 5 different C's that I can play that are actually slightly different pitches. And so, yes, that notation system with the +1 and the +2 and the -1 and the -2 was actually developed by Hermann Helmholtz in the 19th century in a book called On the Sensations of Tone. I happen to have it right here. So, yes.
Okay. Okay, so now that keyboard that you had built, we assume it's electronic, and
Yes.
can you have a lot of different voices on the keyboard as well?
Well, the keyboard itself will just send signals to the computer, and then my computer will have samples. Unfortunately, my computer broke down, which is why I'm speaking in the future tense, because we're recreating it now. But my computer will have sound samples of all the different instruments of the orchestra. So I'll be able to at least hear what it should sound like. And then ideally, I'd like to have live instruments record it.
Cool.
Bob, we really only have time for maybe 1 or 2 quick questions, and then we really need to sign off.
I can't hear you, Nancy. Wait a minute. What'd you say again?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I said that we only have time for 1 or 2 more questions. If you want to pick a couple, and then we need to sign off.
Well, does somebody else have a question? I think the only one I haven't covered is the fact that you can find Chris's music Mandela at this address, and everybody can see it. I think it's Jefferson Humanist to everyone.
Well, I had to ask a question. Is your keyboard the only one in the world? Does anybody else have one?
There are now about 10 or 12 people. Mine was the first.
Okay.
And now there are about 10 or 12 people, and they're doing different tuning systems. None of them are using 53 equal, because again, you can do 72 different pitches
Okay.
per octave. So they're doing their own thing in their own universe too.
All right. Well, then I want to, Bob, did you want to do any concluding remarks before I end it?
Well, no, I had one myself, and I think he explained it, but it'd be good if you just repeat one more time, Chris, the meaning of each one of the rings in the mandala, how they relate to each other.
Each ring in the mandala is a circle of 53 perfect fifths. So like C to G is a fifth, C to E, F, G. So those are the perfect fifths. And then if you go up by a major third or down by a major third, then you get a whole other circle of 53 more perfect fifths starting from that spot.
Okay.
And I have 9, but it actually, you could go on indefinitely in both directions.
Okay. That kind of does it for me.
It's the best I can do. If you're not, if musicians might be able to understand, as non-musicians, I'm not so sure.
I guess, does anyone else have a question for Chris? You want to put in the chat?
No, there aren't any. The last one was, is it possible to buy Chris's music somewhere? I enjoyed it. I thought they really.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear that piece again, the one you did to the poems. Where can we get that?
On my PowerPoint.
It's
it's on your.
It's on my PowerPoint. That's that, and then there's also.
I have his PowerPoint. Yes.
Yeah, and of course it's in From the Realm of the Shadow, which is on.
Yeah, and it's on the video. So
that sounded very much like the music concert we went to in Nepal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it did. Okay, well then I want to thank you very much, Chris. That was really interesting. I must say, as someone who enjoys music but doesn't understand it, that you helped me understand a little bit of it better, but I did love the examples very much. I found them very calming. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts with us. And we know now where to get your, to get a copy of your music too, if we wanted to buy it. So thanks to everyone else also for coming. I do want to tell you that in October, which is, I don't have the exact date, it's the fourth Sunday in October. Our let me find it. I think it is the 25th, October 25th. Our speaker is going to be Kevin Bowling. He's the executive director of the Secular Student Alliance. And we have talked at Jefferson Humanists about how we might engage a younger generation into joining us or thinking about humanism and the relation of humanism to their lives. So Kevin is going to talk about what he does, the Secular Student Alliance, how it works, how we might reach out to some of the 2 and 4 in universities in 2 and 4 year colleges and universities in Jefferson County, and how they might help us. So we ask you to come 4 o'clock on October 25th for Kevin Bowling talking about the next generation of the secular movement. Are you ready? So thank you very much for coming. Matthew, you can probably, everybody want to wave?
Okay, see you later. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Chris, very much.
Appreciate it.